All right, welcome again. As it's Tuesday, every Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, we've got live college football conversation, picks, and analysis. Of course, myself and Paul Stone with you here on Tuesdays and Thursdays, starting at 4 p.m. Eastern, and the 10 with our guys, Doug Kazarian, Greg Waddell, Troy Macker at 4 p.m. Eastern on Wednesdays, breaking down the Big Ten like nobody else can. Losing week for us last week on the games of the week, Paul, so let's get right to it and try and get back on the winning ways. And let's start off with the couple of blue bloods hooking up in a non-conference matchup. We had so many good high-level non-conference matchups last week that made it so much fun. This is one of those in week number 2, and a lot of coaches like to get that dress rehearsal out the way, get some of the kinks out before they play one of these games. So speaking of Texas and Ohio State, I think their previous home and home was like the second week of the season. So it was very early. Oklahoma, Michigan, Oklahoma, both teams 1-0 here. Mateer and his coordinator both come over from Washington State. And so far, so good. Threw for nearly 400 yards and ran for another touchdown as the Sooners beat Illinois State 35-3. And then the five-figure or the eight-figure man, Underwood, the quarterback. Of course, he's going to get the start. His first game ever, 34-17 over New Mexico. Maybe not the wide margin maybe Michigan fans were looking for, but Underwood looked good, looked solid. So it certainly will pick up this week. So both teams 1-0. Current line is 5.5, 46.5. Sooners now the home favorite here, Paul.
Yeah, I tell you, I don't think anybody really questions whether or not Oklahoma's going to be better this year in 2025. It's just a question of how much better will the Sooners be, in my opinion. You know, a 35-3 win over Illinois State doesn't really tell us, in my opinion, a whole lot. Illinois State's not a real talented FCS team. In fact, Illinois State in their previous 3 games versus FBS opponents, they had been shut out by all 3. So the 3 points against Oklahoma on Saturday was kind of a high point mark for the Redbirds, if you will. So, not a great barometer. Last year as well, they lost their season opener, did Illinois State at Iowa 40-0. So, I kind of just write that one off. They went through the motions, got the victory. And now they get to play Michigan, one of the, as you said, true blue bloods in the entire sport, a small sample size. But Michigan, predictably, probably the most, has been good in the role of the underdog, both short-term and long-term. In their last 5 roles as the away underdog, dating back to the start of 2020, they are 4-1 against the spread. They've actually won 3 of those games outright. And you could probably guess 2 of those were over Ohio State on the road. So 4-1, their last 5 against the spread as an away underdog. The Wolverines, a fairly lackluster victory over a New Mexico team that's one of the worst teams in the FBS. Beat the Lobos 34-17, but they were in control the whole way, led by 14 at the half, never really threatened. They did rush for over 200 yards, pass for over 200 yards. So a decent debut there, as you indicated, by LSU or former LSU commit Bryce Underwood, now at Michigan, and will be their quarterback this year. And it will be interesting to watch his growth from game to game and kind of compare where he was this past weekend in their opener against New Mexico and how he's playing at the end of the year when they play Ohio State. They will be Michigan's short a player in the first half. Jayshon Barham, their linebacker, a veteran linebacker who started last year, is going to miss the first half due to a targeting penalty in the second half of the victory over New Mexico. Sharon Moore, the head coach of the Wolverines, was not too pleased with that decision by the officials, but such is life. This line, when you look at it, infers to me the fact that Oklahoma's 5.5-point favorite. It infers, if you take out the 3.5-point advantage for home field, that Oklahoma on a neutral would be 2 points better. And I just don't see that personally. I think these teams are either close to even, maybe Michigan just based on the sound defense that they play year in and year out. I might make them I think I've got them a 0.5 point higher actually than Oklahoma. So I think this is a little bit in a game that could be low scoring. 5.5 is a pretty healthy chunk of points. Brent Venables, obviously he desperately needs a victory to quieten the critics, at least for the time being. And there certainly are a lot of critics out there. I found this stat, I think it's very pertinent to this type of game. In his 3 seasons and 1 game at Oklahoma as the head coach, when the line is 7 or fewer points, whether he's the underdog or favorite, the Sooners are only 3-10 against the spread. So those are games where the market indicates, in their opinion, the collective market, that the teams are, fairly equal, that either team could win. So Venable's not faring too well in those types of games. And also John Mateer, this will be an interesting test for him, a guy that nobody had he's from the state of Texas, outside the DFW area. Nobody had probably heard of him before he started for Washington State last year. And this is a caliber of defense that he's never seen. I mean, Michigan is a step up in class for him individually. It'll be interesting to see how his dual threat game, because he's a great runner of the football, how it translates against the Maize and Blue. But I just think Michigan's going to go in there in Norman, keep it close. I like the Wolverines plus 5.5 over the Sooners.
All right. So Michigan to pick there, maybe a little overreaction with Michigan failing to cover in their first game. Let's go to another non-conference game, and not blue bloods here, but 2 pretty good teams, and both teams won their first opener and won them handily. I like both of these teams, both Illinois and Duke, when we're doing our conference previews as far as their overs. I took over Illinois and also over Duke in this one. I like Duke's schedule a lot. And Illinois, the big story there was they had everybody coming back, all the continuity, the quarterback, several years starting, the coordinators in place. Bielema was there, and they beat a team about as bad as they could win, Western Illinois 52-3. It was ugly early. So, you don't want to struggle. Now, a little bit of kinks in maybe the first quarter at Durham against Elon for Duke. But then Tulane transfer quarterback Darian Mensah really put on a show. Nearly 400 yards and 3 touchdowns, and also another long touchdown pass that was dropped in the game. So 11 and a half yards an attempt is good against air. So, it's hard to not overreact to anything in college football in the first week, but especially some of these teams putting up gaudy numbers or statistics against inferior competition. But I did think that it's still a good. Mensah look good. I mean, my eyeballs, no matter who they're playing, we know he's good, and he looked comfortable in his new surroundings over at Duke. Nobody knows exactly how much they paid for Mensah. They just say they paid a lot. So it's unbelievable, some of the other quarterbacks that he was just much better than that went to much bigger programs than Duke. I think this is kind of a pick'em game. I like 3.5 more than 3. It's currently at 3. It was 3.5 yesterday over at Bet Rivers, but it's 3 right now. The total is 50. But I just think at home in this spot with Mensah, who can move the ball. The one thing that does concern me in this matchup, Elon was able to run the football a little bit. They rushed for more yardage against Duke in that game on Thursday night. So that does concern me a little bit. But going on the road here, I'll take the home dog in a game with a couple of good teams this year. Some of the better teams, more exciting seasons for their teams in quite some time. I'll take the Blue Devils plus the points against the Illini, Paul.
Yeah, I think this is going to be really one of the more interesting games on the board this week as far as betting markets and how the money goes, because I've heard a couple of guys who are on Illinois in this game. Some of the books yesterday opened Illinois at -2.5, and I've heard other respected people that I think highly of their opinion, such as yourself as well, added to that list, who like Duke. So I think there's going to be there's going to be a lot of wise guys, quote unquote, on both sides of the ledger here. I actually made Illinois 4.5, so I might be a little bit too high on the Fighting Illini. I'll certainly agree that I think Brett Bielema, in my opinion anyway, has performed better in the role historically of the hunter rather than the hunted. And when you're a road favorite and you're coming in with the type of expectations, I guess a preseason top 15 ranking, which is not the norm in Illinois' football history, you are a little bit more the hunted, So it'll be interesting to see how he is able to take all those returnees and, with expectations and how they respond and how they perform. And then on Duke's side, I really am, pleasantly, I don't want to say maybe surprised, that might be too strong of a word, but so far, Manny Diaz has come in and he's kind of continued what Mike Elko had in place, which is a program which gets players maybe that some of the others rejected, and they develop them. And instead of, you hear, some coaches do
Yeah.
more with less with more. He does. They've done more with less there in Duke. And I'm really interested to see Darian Mensah and how he performs against a high caliber defense such as Illinois. So be an interesting game to watch for sure.
Going to be a lot of fun. Let's move on to Iowa State. Everybody watched Iowa State to beat Kansas State in Dublin, and maybe we're looking ahead to Iowa, and they took care of business again against South Dakota, went up and down the field. Speaking of offense, how about the Hawkeyes? They scored 34 against Albany in their first game. So they did get the quarterback for the FCS transfer that they're very excited for, and he did fine. Iowa State here at Bet Rivers right now was 3.5. It's now 3 and 41.5. Where are we ready to take the under? This game used to always go under, but maybe not so with these teams this year. But you're looking at the side here with the Hawkeyes.
Yeah, I am. The road team in this series, Jimmy's won the last 5 straight games. Iowa State's actually been the dog the previous 3 years, and of course this year installed as the favorite. And you mentioned their first-year quarterback looking at Iowa, Mark Gronowski, a guy who played 5 years at South Dakota State, which is one of the FCS powerhouses. In those 5 years, he started 55 career games and threw for over 10,000 yards for the Jackrabbits. You mentioned Iowa's victory over Albany of the FCS. Beat them 34-7. I don't do much with teams' power ratings based on games against FCS teams unless they're playing really a power. Otherwise, I pretty much ignore it. I certainly look at the stats. And Gronowski, I didn't watch the game, so I can't issue a strong opinion on what it looked like in getting to these numbers. But Gronowski in his Iowa debut, 8 of 15 for 44 yards. So a little bit under 3 yards per attempt. Iowa State got the victory last year. They were trailing 19-7 in the third quarter. They rallied to defeat Iowa 20-19 on a last-second field goal. I think Iowa State at some point, they traveled. They had a long preseason camp, obviously, started a little bit early to prepare for that week 0 trip to Dublin, Ireland, the trip across the Atlantic. August 23rd to face Kansas State in the Big 12 opener. And I think at some point they might start showing, some signs perhaps of residual effects. And I just like the underdog here. It's usually a low-scoring game. I took the Hawkeyes +3 over Iowa State.
All right, the Hawkeyes. Yeah, so we don't want to overreact to ugly offensive football in week 1 of the college football season, but damn it, you got to be throwing for more than 44 yards against Albany. So, I mean, that is against that caliber of competition. So that might be same old, same old. We'll have to see with the Hawkeyes. But they stole one 2 years ago. I know that against Iowa State. Iowa State had them. It should have won the game, but Iowa hung around, and they stole it at the end. And Ferentz, the dean of all coaches in college football, still getting it done. 8 or 9 wins each and every year. Let's look at another one. This was the opening week of the Labor Day weekend last year. This was one of the first games that kicked off at noon Eastern on that Saturday, and that was Vanderbilt and Virginia Tech. And I mean, Vandy jumped all over Virginia Tech early. Diego Vanderbilt, he was something. And just listening to some of the other players talk at SEC Media Days about Pop, he's their leader, man. He's their juice. He gives them. It's hard to create a little confidence and swagger with the Vanderbilt program, which you're dealing with such an uphill situation in the SEC. But then again, Virginia Tech against South Carolina, neutral site game on Sunday. That was the appetizer for Notre Dame in Miami on Sunday night. And Virginia Tech fell behind early, but out first down South Carolina, but came up short 2-0 on the turnover margin. And then, of course, an 80-yard punt return for a touchdown. That'll get you as well. But I just like Virginia Tech in this revenge spot here. I saw enough of drones and enough of they're fine. They went toe-to-toe with a team that's a top 15. I don't think South Carolina is going to end up in the top 15, but they're currently rated there right now. We talked about them. Maybe the pollsters and the media are just a year behind on South Carolina. Sellers didn't really impress me. Didn't look like he has taken the next step in his passing development. He can run. I don't know if there's anybody can run at 240 like he can. I don't know. I don't know too many guys that want to get in front of him when he gets full speed. But Vanderbilt again, 45-3 over Charleston Southern. Again, 1-point favorite on the road here. I'm sorry, Virginia Tech 1-point favorite at home here in Blacksburg, which is going to be tough. They ain't giving up on their team just yet. So I like the Hokies home field revenge spot. We're respectable in week 1 against South Carolina, Paul.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned that game last year, that season opener. Vanderbilt goes in there as a 13.5-point home underdog, I believe, and wins that game 34-27. I was one of, there were other people. I'll just speak for myself. I was high on Virginia Tech last year. They had a lot of people back. I didn't think they were going to win the ACC, but I thought they were going to be, a top 4 team perhaps in that league, and it just didn't pan out that way. But this is we don't have the marquee games obviously in week 2 that we had in week 1. What a tremendous week 1 card that we had. But there are a lot of intriguing matchups, and this is certainly one of those. I mean, Vanderbilt and Virginia Tech, based on last year's result and just based on, Vanderbilt kind of obviously not the weak sister that they used to be, the pushover, the automatic win. Diego Pavia brings so many eyeballs to their games to begin with. And then you got a Virginia Tech team. I mean, they need a victory. And I like to take teams in certain spots in week 2 after they lost their opener, especially if they played a good team and had a game effort, as you were pointing out some of the statistics there. They need a win victory. They need to right the ship. They need a victory badly. They need to right the ship and get some forward momentum. So I'm not involved in this game and probably won't, but it's a very intriguing game and a very interesting game. I'll certainly be watching.
All right, let's go to the Southwestern Conference, right? Huh? SMU and Baylor here. So they've jumped around conferences a little bit, but it is a battle of Texas between these private schools here. In SMU, a 2.5 and 64.5-point favorite in the total at Bet Rivers right now. Baylor outgained Auburn 483-415, but 3 failed 4th down attempts. Those are like turnovers, and those were big. And also, when they had a 3-0 lead, it should have been 10 or 14. And when they didn't extend their lead, and once Auburn got going, they had a hard time stopping them, especially the quarterback draw over and over and over again. The quarterback keeper just killed Baylor as Auburn beat them in Waco on Friday night. The Mustangs 2.5, 64.5 at against Baylor here, Paul.
Yeah, Baylor obviously didn't get the easy schedule memo. They opened at home against Auburn, played a game opponent, and, the Tigers, boy, they ran that ball on them. You mentioned Jackson Arnold. He was quite the weapon, kind of a run-first mentality, it seemed like, but he got the job done against Baylor. Auburn runs for 307 yards. 5.9 yards per carry. But I don't think SMU is going to run the ball like that. In fact, I'm almost certain they won't run the ball anywhere near that effectively against Baylor, even though Baylor is clearly vulnerable versus the run. But SMU, they lose their 1,300-yard rusher from last year, Brashard Smith. He's expired his eligibility. And they only did the Ponies in their opener, 4.2 yards per carry against East Texas A&M. So just a little over 4 yards a carry. You would think that would be maybe over 6. So that's a little bit concerning if you're an SMU fan. And also their tight end, RJ Maryland, who got hurt probably in September, early last year. He's probably the best offensive weapon on that team, on that roster this year, at least one of them. He didn't play in the opener. He missed maybe 8 or 9 games last year, didn't play in the opener. So you have to expect he probably won't be available against Baylor. So that takes away one of the Ponies' primary weapons. And then looking on defense, SMU, they do have a lot of reinforcements through the portal, but they only returned 3 of their top 10 tacklers from 1 year ago. And this Baylor team, they've lost 2 in a row now. If you go back to last year, after closing the regular season with 6 straight, they lost to an SEC school, LSU, in the bowl game, got out physical pretty much. And then the same thing happened in the season opener this year against another SEC entry, Auburn. But Baylor can throw the ball. Sawyer Robertson, 419 yards, 3 touchdowns against Auburn in the opener. Got a lot of talented receivers. Our top guy, Josh Cameron's back. And the guy who's a transfer from Texas State, he really had a big game against Auburn. Cole Wilson, 8 catches for 134 yards. So they've got some good guys, some additional new guys in that receiver room. I think Baylor's going to go in there desperately in need of a victory. They don't want to start 0-2. I think they're going to beat the Ponies at Gerald Ford Stadium. I like Baylor plus 2.5 over SMU.
Dave Aranda likes to employ that 3-4 alignment defensively, and I don't know if he's got a guy like Ika, the big Utah nose tackle that was a transfer from LSU back when they won the Big 12 championship and also the Sugar Bowl championship. He said his words, this is a better roster, the best roster he's had. I do agree with you. They've got some explosive guys catching the ball from Sawyer Robertson. I mean, they looked really quick and they can go. So just incomplete drives when they got to, in the red zone early, and the 4th downs, of course, were an obvious problem. So Baylor to bounce back here against SMU, and SMU's lost a lot. We'll say it's a lot more. It's one of those cases where, like Norris Sellers, he lost a lot of his supporting cast. Same thing with the SMU quarterback. We'll have to see. And early on, it didn't exactly light it up. So we'll see what happens there. Talk about last year and talk about one of the embarrassing games that we saw non-conference. I mean, SEC team getting beat like this. We didn't know how good Arizona State was at the time, and it was kind of opened a lot of our eyes in the Southeastern Conference seeing this result. Now they come back and everybody's got Arizona State. They're supposed to bounce. Now there's expectations for Arizona State. Be careful of those teams that exceed expectations one year. How many can actually sustain it the following year? It's not many. So they lost in a big way. I had against Mississippi State last week. I like the spot with Southern Miss catching all those points on our best bets. That was on Thursday and did not cover in that one. It's 10-10, looked fine, and then the Mississippi State scored 24 unanswered. Talking about Baylor quarterbacks, former Baylor quarterback Blake Shapen was the outstanding player of that Big 12 championship win against Oklahoma State. He looked fine. He threw for 277 and threw it to 10, spread it around to 10 different receivers. And, just Mississippi State's roster just looked maybe a little bit better than maybe it was last year. Don't want to overreact. Arizona State, ho-hum, 38-19 win over Northern Arizona in their first win. There'll be more. But the revenge factor here, the home field advantage, and cats from Phoenix, Phoenix to Starkville, that's a little bit of a culture shock right there. So Kyle Bells will be rolling in that one. Oh, they're outlawed, but you can book it. They'll be blaring your ears out each and every home game. I'll go with Mississippi State, the Bulldogs at home dog, going a couple of home dogs today against Arizona State to surprise people and keep this one very close, if not win it outright.
Yeah, I mean, this is another one of these intriguing week 2 matchups. I mean, Arizona State clearly has a lot of people back, but when you lose a person that had the productivity of Cam Skataboo, I mean, this is a guy last year rushed for over 1,700 yards, 21 touchdowns rushing, had 45 catches out of the backfield for 605 yards. So, I mean, that guy was just Sam Levitt's go-to man. And when you lose such a large component of your offense, it's got to have some effect. So we'll see, see what the Sun Devils are, this year. Obviously going from 16th picked in the preseason poll last year to winning the Big 12 was quite the accomplishment. And there might be a little bit of regression to the mean, so to speak. This is a game, I think the squares are going to be on Arizona State. I might be wrong. The so-called squares will be on Arizona State, and the sharps will be on Mississippi State. The number looks I've had a few people ask me if I thought the number was a little bit light. I'm not going to probably be involved in this one because I just don't have a whole lot of faith in Jeff Lebby as a head coach for Mississippi State. So that's what's keeping me off of it. But I'll definitely be rooting for you here. The home underdog there in Starkville, going to be a very interesting game for sure on Saturday.
There we go. Yeah, we were trying to project this game in the offseason, and A lot of people thought that this was going to be higher. So, look, man, that home field advantage still means something. So, and it certainly did in week one in college football. So, don't forget myself and Paul Stone. It's every Tuesday and Thursday, 4 p.m. Eastern. On Tuesday, it's the high-profile games, the games that we think are going to draw the most volume and most handle at Bet Rivers. And then on Thursday, our best bets. So, we're going to had a losing week last week, so we're trying to get back on the right track for you and get this thing going. Don't forget on Wednesday. So it's 3 straight days every Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. College football picks and angles. Of course, the 10 every Wednesday, same time, 4 p.m. Eastern, with Doug Kazarian, Greg Waddell, and Troy Macker. For Paul Stone, I'm Jimmy Ott. We will see you on Thursday with our best bets right here in the College Sports Rush, the YouTube channel on Bet Rivers Network.